Look here. The suspension is failing the load test.
What's that, boy?
We can't send these to the European theater like this. It's suicide. Every rivet on this frame means the difference between victory and failure. Our boys overseas are counting on us.
The axle is cracked clean through here.
Yeah. And the engine mounts are loose on half the fleet. We need to report this immediately. This tolerance is too tight, it won't clear the housing. We can't widen it, the specs won't allow it. We have to make it work, find a way.
January 1941. The bitter wind slices through Detroit streets, rattling factory windows. Inside the dimly lit assembly halls of GMC, the scent of hot metal and oil hangs heavy. Sparks fly as welders shape steel frames, and the steady roar of machinery echoes like distant artillery. Workers wipe sweat from their brows, hands blackened, eyes scanning blueprints that have become their new gospel. Outside, the U.S. Army stands in uneasy silence. Their supply columns are skeletal, reliant on outdated civilian trucks pressed into service. Across the Atlantic, German divisions surge with mechanized precision, and American officers know that, if war comes tomorrow, mobility will be the difference between survival and catastrophe. A prototype rolls out on the polished concrete floor, its tires scuffed, its chassis untested. Engineers and soldiers circle it, murmuring assessments, weighing hope against doubt. Each rivet, each bolt carries the weight of an unprepared nation. Somewhere in that hall, a foreman mutters, "If these hold, we can move mountains. If they fail, we may not even reach the front." The first American military trucks are born not from glory, but from necessity, a race against time that will shape the battlefield before the first shot is fired. By early 1941, the world had already been at war for over a year. Europe was ablaze. France had fallen, Britain stood alone against the Luftwaffe, and German panzer divisions moved with frightening speed across the continent. Across the Atlantic, the United States remained officially neutral, but the shadows of conflict had already stretched across its borders. Washington was scrambling to prepare, to modernize, to rearm, but the reality was stark. The U.S. Army's mobility infrastructure was catastrophically underdeveloped. When inspectors surveyed the motor pools, they found a patchwork of aging trucks, most built for civilian delivery or postal routes. Many had engines prone to overheating, suspensions unable to handle heavy cargo, and chassis that buckled under weight. Standardization was virtually non-existent. A single unit could find itself stranded because spare parts for one model wouldn't fit another. Supply convoys, if sent into battle today, would collapse under the strain of terrain, weather, and enemy action. Enter General Brian Somervell, head of the Army's Services of Supply. Somervell understood that logistics were the sinews of war. He wrote memos stressing the need for a new generation of motor vehicles capable of carrying heavy loads across any terrain under any conditions. His vision was precise. Vehicles must endure mud, sand, snow, and gravel. Engines must run for thousands of miles without failure, and all parts must be interchangeable. Yet, the U.S. auto industry was unprepared. GMC, or General Motors Company, was known for its commercial trucks and buses. Its factories hummed with experience in large-scale production, but nothing on the scale the Army now demanded. The government approached GMC with a directive that was as urgent as it was unprecedented: design and deliver a fleet of heavy-duty military trucks within months. No prototypes had yet proven their reliability, and the scale of production required would test every aspect of the company's engineering and manufacturing prowess. The challenge was enormous. The U.S. Army asked for 2.5-ton and 6x6 trucks capable of carrying soldiers, artillery, and fuel. Payloads would range from several thousand pounds of munitions to massive howitzers. GMC engineers pored over blueprints, tested new engines, reinforced suspensions, and experimented with drivetrain configurations. Every design choice carried consequences. Too heavy, and the trucks would bog down in mud. Too light, and they would collapse under load. There was no room for error, no margin for improvisation in the chaos of battle. Meanwhile, American industry as a whole was just awakening to the reality of global war. The arsenal of democracy, as President Franklin D. Roosevelt would call it, had yet to be fully realized. Factories were running at peacetime capacity, and skilled labor was in short supply. Materials, steel, rubber, and aluminum were tightly rationed. Yet urgency drove innovation. Engineers slept beside drawing tables. Machinists worked double shifts. Assembly lines were retooled in record time. GMC became a microcosm of this industrial awakening, a place where sweat, ingenuity, and necessity collided to produce machines that might very well decide the fate of American troops overseas. Beyond the factories, the Army was also rethinking strategy. Supply lines would no longer be limited to railroads or horses. Mechanized warfare demanded trucks that could traverse deserts in North Africa, muddy fields in France, and jungle tracks in the Pacific. Officers studied maps, drew supply routes, and imagined convoys stretching for miles. Every mile the Army could move reliably depended on trucks that hadn't yet been built. And so, in the winter of 1941, GMC faced a paradox. Build vehicles fast enough to prevent defeat, but robust enough to withstand war itself. Each prototype that rolled off the line was a gamble, a promise that American ingenuity could bridge the gap between unpreparedness and battlefield survival. Soldiers and officers alike watched, hopeful and anxious, as these first mechanical lifelines began their slow, deliberate emergence. This emerging tension, the U.S. on the brink, an industry racing against time, engineers testing the limits of technology, sets the stage for the story of GMC's heavy-duty trucks. Their journey from prototype to battlefield stalwart would not only reshape the Army's mobility, but redefine the American approach to mechanized logistics. The first trucks were more than vehicles. They were symbols of a nation awakening to the demands of modern war, where speed, endurance, and reliability could no longer be optional. By mid-1941, GMC's engineers had begun translating military requirements into metal and machinery. The U.S. Army demanded trucks that could traverse any landscape, endure heavy loads, and operate without frequent maintenance. These weren't simple delivery vans or farm trucks. They were intended to carry artillery pieces, fuel, ammunition, and soldiers across deserts, forests, and frozen plains. Every specification was exacting. 6x6 drive, 2.5-ton payload minimum, high ground clearance, reinforced axles, and engines powerful enough to climb steep grades without stalling. Even the cab design required attention. Protection from the elements, space for multiple crew members, and ease of repair in the field. Testing proved brutal. Early prototypes struggled under weight. Engines overheated, and suspensions collapsed on uneven terrain. In snowy Michigan, trucks sank into mud during winter trials. In Virginia, testing officers noted frame flexing under repeated stress. Every failure revealed a lesson, every success a narrow triumph. GMC engineers learned to reinforce chassis with chromium molybdenum steel, introduce modular drivetrains, and adapt civilian engine designs for military endurance. These adaptations were painstaking and iterative, often taking weeks to perfect a single component. Procurement officers worked alongside engineers to create standardization. Before 1941, the Army had dozens of different truck models, many incompatible with one another. Field repairs were slow, parts scarce, and convoys delayed. GMC's mission became not only building trucks, but unifying an entire fleet around interchangeable parts and uniform performance. Soldiers in training depots ran mock convoys, identifying weak points in suspension, braking, and fuel systems. Feedback was immediate, precise, and sometimes brutal. Each comment, each failed trial, shaped the next prototype in a cycle of relentless improvement. Meanwhile, logistical planning escalated. The Army projected that a single division would require hundreds of trucks for supply alone. Convoys could stretch for miles, moving ammunition, rations, and medical supplies to forward units. Without reliable trucks, these plans were impossible. GMC's role transcended engineering. They were now architects of the Army's mobility, designing vehicles that would dictate how far, how fast, and how efficiently the U.S. could fight. The company faced industrial hurdles as well. Factories had to be retooled for military production, jigs and dies redesigned for new chassis dimensions, and laborers retrained for precision welding and assembly. Wartime shortages of steel, rubber, and other essential materials compounded the pressure. Yet necessity drove innovation. Engineers introduced modular components that could be mass-produced, truck cabs that could be bolted rather than welded, and standardized engines that allowed mechanics to replace parts quickly in the field. Each decision balanced speed of production with durability. Too much of either could mean disaster. By autumn 1941, the first truly military-spec GMC trucks began to emerge from the factories. These were no longer civilian vehicles adapted for war. They were purpose-built machines, engineered to carry the weight of an army across continents. Officers inspected them, measuring load capacity, testing engines, and checking drivetrains for performance under stress. Soldiers performed simulated convoys, navigating rivers, mud, and hills. These tests would dictate modifications before the trucks could even leave the factory, ensuring they could withstand the unpredictability of combat conditions. The stage was set for these trucks to transition from workshop marvels to battlefield lifelines. What began as sketches on drafting tables had become rolling machines of steel and rubber, each one a testament to human ingenuity under pressure. GMC had not merely built trucks. They had created a bridge between industrial capability and military necessity, a tangible expression of the nation's readiness to confront the mechanized horrors of global war. And yet, even as the first convoy of GMC trucks prepared to leave Detroit, there remained uncertainty. Could these vehicles endure the harsh conditions of North Africa's deserts, the frozen roads of Europe, or the jungles of the Pacific? Could a nation, still officially neutral, equip its army fast enough to meet the demands of modern warfare? The answer would emerge only in the crucible of conflict, where trucks, men, and machines would collide with the realities of war. But before that reckoning, It was time to examine the story from multiple perspectives, the human, technological, tactical, and moral angles that define this pivotal chapter in U.S. military history. Inside the GMC factories, the human story was immediate and visceral. Men and women, many drafted into industrial service for the first time, worked shoulder to shoulder with engineers and supervisors. Sweat streamed down faces, hands blackened by oil and soot, eyes fixed on machinery that moved with the precision of a heartbeat. There was no room for error. A misaligned axle or a weak weld could mean a truck breaking down miles from the front line, or worse, soldiers stranded under enemy fire. The emotional stakes were high. Workers carried the weight of a nation's expectations. Letters from soldiers, updates from training depots, and government memos were pinned to factory walls, a constant reminder of what was at stake. For many, this was the first direct connection to the war raging across the Atlantic. Their labor became both a contribution and a gamble. Every bolt tightened, every engine tested, every chassis reinforced was an effort to protect lives they had never met. In parallel, soldiers in training camps faced a different anxiety. They studied maps, practiced driving untested vehicles, and learned to improvise repairs. Mechanics scoured every nut, bolt, and tire, aware that their ability to supply frontline units rested entirely on machines still proving themselves. Human endurance intertwined with mechanical reliability. One failed truck could delay an entire convoy, and one convoy could determine whether a mission succeeded or failed. The Army's tactical thinking depended on mobility. Unlike trench warfare of the previous generation, World War II demanded fast, flexible supply lines. Artillery pieces, fuel convoys, and ammunition columns needed trucks capable of traveling off-road, bridging rivers, and navigating mountains. GMC's heavy-duty trucks became the backbone of this mobility strategy. Officers ran simulations of supply chains. Convoys stretching for miles would need to maintain consistent speed while carrying heavy loads. If a truck broke down, it could create bottlenecks that immobilized entire divisions. GMC vehicles, tested for endurance, became critical tactical tools, providing not only transport, but the ability to project force across previously impassable terrain. Their tires, engines, and suspensions were designed not merely for speed, but for reliability under stress, a tactical advantage the Army could not afford to lose. Innovation drove the GMC story. The company introduced modular drivetrains, reinforced axles, and standardized engines capable of operating in extreme climates. Engineers adapted civilian engine designs to military specifications, emphasizing torque over speed, durability over comfort. Suspensions were strengthened, frames redesigned, and cab structures made modular for easier repair in the field. This was more than engineering, it was problem-solving under pressure. Material shortages, labor constraints, and tight deadlines forced rapid innovation. Every prototype tested, every component redesigned, reflected lessons learned in the field or on testing tracks. GMC's heavy-duty trucks were as much a triumph of American ingenuity as they were a practical solution to logistical shortcomings. At the heart of the GMC truck program were the decisions made in offices far from the factory floor. Army leaders like General Brehon Somervell and his staff of procurement officers navigated a maze of specifications, deadlines, and industrial limitations. They had to balance urgency against practicality, ensuring that the vehicles would meet battlefield needs without stalling production. Meetings were tense, debates frequent. Engineers pushed for perfection, stronger frames, more powerful engines, improved suspension, while procurement officers pressed for speed, knowing every month of delay risked leaving American forces unprepared. Somervell insisted on standardized designs and interchangeable parts, a revolutionary concept at the time. His vision reshaped not just GMC's approach, but the entire U.S. Army logistics strategy, laying the foundation for mass mobilization. Leadership extended beyond the Army. GMC executives faced the challenge of translating abstract military requirements into reality. Factory layouts were overhauled, production schedules extended into nights and weekends, and labor forces expanded with untrained workers. Leadership at both ends, military and industrial, required foresight, coordination, and the ability to absorb failure without losing momentum. Across oceans, Axis powers demonstrated the devastating efficiency of mechanized logistics. German panzer divisions relied on robust trucks to carry fuel, munitions, and supplies across occupied territories. Their mobility allowed rapid advances and sustained campaigns far from home bases. Italian and Japanese forces, while less mechanized, also highlighted the necessity of reliable transport for sustaining offensive operations. American observers noted these lessons with urgency. Reports from the front emphasized that a division without fuel, ammunition, or artillery support would falter regardless of troop courage. GMC's trucks were more than vehicles. They were a response to a proven enemy advantage. Each mile they could reliably carry men and material became a countermeasure, a step toward parity, and ultimately superiority in mechanized warfare. Industrial mobilization carried moral weight. Factories now employed thousands, including women and minority workers, in jobs previously inaccessible to them. Laborers faced long hours, grueling conditions, and the constant pressure of national expectation. Yet this work was imbued with purpose. Producing trucks capable of saving lives on the battlefield became a moral mission, a tangible contribution to defeating tyranny overseas. At the same time, the moral responsibility weighed heavily on engineers and officers. Every design decision could ripple through to the battlefield. A failed axle or weak suspension was not merely a mechanical flaw. It was a potential threat to soldiers' lives. The moral calculus of war extended into factories, as human hands, ingenuity, and judgment were tested alongside steel and rubber. Together, these perspectives reveal the complex ecosystem behind GMC's heavy-duty trucks. Human endurance, tactical necessity, technological innovation, leadership foresight, enemy pressure, and moral responsibility all converged to shape the machines that would carry America into war. The factories of Detroit became frontline workshops, engineers became strategists, and laborers became soldiers of industry. Yet even with every angle accounted for, the true test lay ahead. Designing and building a truck was one challenge. Sending it into combat was another entirely. The crucible of the battlefield would determine which innovations endured, which strategies succeeded, and which lives were saved or lost. By late 1941, the first fully standardized GMC heavy-duty trucks were rolling off factory lines. Detroit's streets hummed with activity, the air thick with the scent of oil, steel, and urgency. Soldiers lined up alongside engineers, inspecting chassis, testing engines, and measuring payload capacity. Each truck carried not just supplies, but the weight of a nation on the brink of war. Pearl Harbor struck on December 7th, 1941, catapulting the United States from preparedness into full-scale conflict. Overnight, GMC's trucks became critical assets, their importance magnified by the urgent need to mobilize troops and material across the Pacific, Europe, and North Africa. Convoys that had been theoretical exercises in training depots now represented lifelines for forces scattered across oceans and continents. The North African campaign highlighted the truck's first real challenge. The desert terrain was unforgiving, sand-clogged engines, heat-warped metal, and the relentless sun threatened tires and fuel lines. Yet GMC's innovations endured. Modular drivetrains allowed crews to replace engines and transmissions quickly, while reinforced axles and high-clearance suspensions enabled convoys to traverse dunes that would have stalled lesser vehicles. Engineers celebrated each success quietly, knowing that every mile gained in North Africa meant artillery, fuel, and rations reached the front line in time. Meanwhile, in Europe, GMC trucks were deployed to transport troops and supplies across muddy fields and war-torn roads. The winter of 1942 to 43 tested the vehicle's durability further. Engines refused to turn in icy conditions, brakes froze, and frames buckled under heavy loads. Soldiers improvised with heaters, antifreeze, and makeshift repairs, relying on the modular design to keep convoys moving. GMC trucks proved resilient, but the campaigns revealed weaknesses that required rapid adaptation, an ongoing dialogue between factory engineers and field mechanics. The Pacific Theater presented a different set of challenges: tropical rain, jungle paths, and unstable bridges. Trucks designed for deserts and European roads were pushed to their limits. Yet here, too, the American logistical machine adapted. Units experimented with stripped-down versions of trucks to reduce weight, while engineers back home introduced corrosion-resistant coatings and improved cooling systems. Each improvement emerged directly from combat experience, a testament to GMC's responsiveness under pressure. Amid the chaos of deployment, leadership decisions proved decisive. General Somervell's insistence on standardization allowed spare parts and maintenance manuals to be interchangeable across theaters. Convoy commanders could move vehicles thousands of miles with confidence, knowing that replacement axles or tires would fit regardless of the truck's origin. This foresight prevented catastrophic delays and minimized the attrition of men and material, a critical advantage in campaigns where supply lines were often the difference between victory and defeat. Even as GMC trucks gained acclaim, the human dimension remained central. Mechanics worked tirelessly to repair vehicles at night. Soldiers navigated treacherous terrain, and engineers sent modifications in real time, often through teletype or radio reports. Each convoy told a story of endurance, ingenuity, and the relentless pressure of wartime necessity. A single broken truck could delay an entire operation, yet the cumulative effect of thousands of GMC vehicles moving reliably across deserts, jungles, and frozen roads underscored the machine's strategic impact. The turning point became clear in 1943. In North Africa, during the push against Axis supply lines, GMC trucks enabled rapid redeployment of American artillery units, allowing U.S. forces to outmaneuver entrenched German positions. Fuel convoys reached frontline tanks, ammunition arrived ahead of assaults, and medical units were supplied faster than ever before. The trucks had transformed theory into reality. Mechanized logistics was no longer a concept, but a decisive weapon on the battlefield. The journey from blueprint to battlefield was complete. From the smoky assembly halls of Detroit to the scorching sands of Libya, from frozen European roads to Pacific jungles, GMC's heavy-duty trucks had proven themselves indispensable. Yet the war was far from over, and each victory revealed new challenges, higher demands, longer supply lines, and the unrelenting strain of global combat. The stage was set for the next phase, the culmination of engineering, strategy, and human endurance in the largest military mobilization the world had ever seen. The trucks had survived testing, trials, and initial deployment. But could they sustain the American war effort through its most decisive campaigns? By 1943, GMC trucks had become the lifeblood of U.S. Army operations across multiple continents. Their presence was felt in every theater of war, moving troops, artillery, fuel, and supplies with a reliability that often determined the success of campaigns. In North Africa, the desert sun beat down on convoys stretching for miles. Sandstorms threatened to bury wheels and clog radiators. Yet GMC trucks forged ahead, their reinforced suspensions absorbing every dune and dip. Each delivery meant the difference between immobilized forces and the fluid maneuvers that frustrated German counterattacks. The Sicily invasion in July 1943 highlighted another layer of logistical importance. Ports were damaged or heavily defended, forcing convoys to travel inland over narrow, mountainous roads. GMC trucks, many carrying artillery pieces or fuel barrels, were pushed to their mechanical limits. Crews navigated hairpin turns, collapsed bridges, and debris-strewn routes. Soldiers marveled at the vehicle's endurance, while field commanders relied on their capacity to maintain the tempo of advance. Delays could cost lives, but the trucks delivered, keeping the operation on schedule, allowing U.S. forces to establish beachheads with minimal disruption. In the European mainland, the winter of 1944 brought Operation Overlord and the subsequent push through France and into Germany. GMC vehicles were everywhere, hauling rations to frontline troops, transporting tanks, towing artillery, and evacuating wounded soldiers. Mud, snow, and shattered infrastructure challenged every mile, yet the truck's modular design allowed on-site repairs that minimized convoy delays. Spare parts kits were standardized. Mechanics had clear manuals and interchangeable components. What once seemed like a luxury, the ability to repair a vehicle quickly, now defined operational effectiveness. The Pacific Theater, however, proved the harshest test. Dense jungles, heavy monsoon rains, and unstable terrain required improvisation. Soldiers stripped excess weight to cross. Narrow paths. Engineers adapted cooling systems to handle tropical heat. At Guadalcanal, trucks carried ammunition and medical supplies along precarious tracks, often under enemy fire. Despite constant maintenance needs, GMC's heavy-duty vehicles performed where civilian trucks would have failed. Their presence allowed infantry units to sustain prolonged campaigns and respond quickly to Japanese maneuvers. Every deployment taught lessons. Convoy formations evolved to maximize protection. Trucks were reinforced for extreme climates, and drivers developed techniques to conserve engines and prevent breakdowns. GMC's design philosophy, modularity, durability, and adaptability proved prescient. Where other nations struggled with inconsistent or fragile vehicles, American forces leveraged industrial ingenuity to maintain operational momentum. The trucks became symbols of logistical superiority, bridging the gap between production lines in Detroit and battlefields across the globe. Leadership coordination remained crucial. General Somervell's insistence on standardization allowed thousands of vehicles to be deployed without confusion. Supply officers tracked convoys across continents, anticipating fuel, ammunition, and maintenance needs. Field reports flowed back to GMC engineers, who implemented rapid improvements in ongoing production. This continuous feedback loop meant that failures were addressed immediately, and innovations reached soldiers faster than enemy forces could adapt. Yet the challenges of war were relentless. Convoys were targeted by airstrikes, artillery fire, and sabotage. Trucks broke down in inhospitable conditions, forcing soldiers to improvise repairs using whatever materials were at hand. In some campaigns, abandoned vehicles littered the roads, evidence of both the war's brutality and the limits of even the most robust engineering. Still, the sheer scale of production, tens of thousands of GMC trucks by mid-1944, ensure that failures never halted operations entirely. Redundancy became as important as durability. The true turning point was not a single battle, but a cumulative effect. GMC trucks enabled the U.S. Army to project force across deserts, mountains, rivers, and oceans. They delivered artillery faster than enemy counterattacks could respond, transported fuel to mechanized units before mobility faltered, and sustained long supply lines that might otherwise have collapsed. Soldiers on the front lines recognized their value. Commanders depended on them. Without these trucks, entire campaigns could have stalled, and the strategic rhythm of the Allied advance would have faltered. By the end of 1944, the story of GMC trucks was one of relentless adaptation and decisive contribution. From untested prototypes to battlefield workhorses, they had proven their worth. Each mile traversed, each convoy completed, and each engine repaired in the field represented a triumph of American industrial ingenuity, leadership foresight, and human endurance. The mechanized lifelines that sustained victory were no longer abstract concepts. They were rolling steel, tire, and sweat, moving relentlessly toward the front. The success of these vehicles set the stage for the aftermath of war. The transformation of logistics, the influence on post-war vehicle design, and the psychological impact on soldiers who came to rely on machines as much as on their comrades. GMC trucks had not only kept the Army moving, they had helped shape the way the United States fought and won a global war. By the end of 1945, the scale of GMC's contribution to the war effort was staggering. Over 500,000 heavy-duty military trucks had been produced, spanning cargo haulers, personnel carriers, and specialized variants designed for towing artillery or transporting fuel. These vehicles had traversed deserts, jungles, mountains, and snow-covered roads, often under fire, and their presence had become indispensable to the operational tempo of the U.S. Army. The numbers alone tell part of the story. In North Africa, convoys of GMC trucks carried thousands of tons of ammunition to frontline units during the campaigns of 1942 to 43. In Europe, GMC vehicles sustained the massive logistical demands of Operation Overlord and subsequent pushes across France and into Germany. In the Pacific, trucks transported supplies along primitive roads and makeshift paths on islands where conventional vehicles could not operate. Each mission reinforced a simple truth. Without reliable trucks, modern mechanized warfare was impossible. Field reports highlighted both reliability and resilience. Soldiers noted that while civilian or older military trucks often broke down after a few hundred miles, GMC's standardized heavy-duty models could endure thousands of miles with minimal maintenance. Convoys became predictable and efficient, enabling commanders to plan operations with confidence that troops and supplies would arrive on time. Artillery units could be redeployed rapidly, fuel depots replenished regularly, and medical evacuation conducted without catastrophic delays. The logistical bottlenecks that had haunted U.S. forces in 1941 were now largely eliminated. The human impact of this industrial achievement was equally profound. Mechanics gained expertise in repair under extreme conditions. Soldiers learned to navigate vehicles in the most demanding environments, and engineers understood the critical relationship between production standards and battlefield effectiveness. GMC trucks were not merely machines. They were instruments of coordination, endurance, and human ingenuity translated into steel and rubber. Leadership perspectives reinforced the vehicle's significance. General Somervell later remarked that standardized trucks were among the Army's greatest strategic advantages. They allowed the U.S. to sustain operations across multiple theaters simultaneously, a feat unmatched by Axis powers, whose supply lines often faltered due to inferior vehicles or inconsistent production. The Army's logistical doctrine evolved alongside GMC's engineering innovations, integrating motorized transport as a central component of operational planning. The psychological effect on soldiers was tangible. Convoys moving reliably under difficult conditions bolster morale, providing reassurance that supplies would reach the front line and wounded soldiers could be evacuated efficiently. GMC trucks became trusted companions on the battlefield, their steady engines and durable frames symbols of American industrial power. Soldiers wrote letters home describing long journeys across deserts or mountains, recounting how these machines carried not only cargo, but the hope of sustained resistance and victory. Even as the war concluded, the truck's impact persisted. Post-war reports emphasized that without GMC's heavy-duty vehicles, campaigns such as the rapid advance through Europe or sustained operations in the Pacific might have faced catastrophic delays. Industrial mobilization had met military necessity, transforming the U.S. Army into a mechanized force capable of global projection. Yet the lessons extended beyond numbers and morale. GMC's success demonstrated that industrial agility, combined with standardization and rigorous testing, could directly influence the outcome of modern warfare. The trucks were a testament to foresight, ingenuity, and collaboration between engineers, laborers, and military planners, a triumph that resonated far beyond Detroit's factories and distant battlefields. This foundation set the stage for the final analysis, the broader consequences of GMC trucks, how they reshaped post-war military vehicle design, and the enduring legacy of America's first true heavy-duty wartime fleet. The legacy of GMC heavy-duty trucks extended far beyond the war itself. By 1946, production had slowed, but the impact of hundreds of thousands of trucks moving troops, supplies, and artillery across multiple continents was undeniable. Military analysts credited these vehicles with a decisive role in sustaining long supply lines, enabling rapid redeployment and maintaining operational tempo, capabilities the U.S. Army had lacked just 5 years earlier. Post-war reports highlight the truck's enduring influence on vehicle design and military logistics. The Army's field service manuals emphasize standardized parts, modular engines, and reinforced chassis, principles directly derived from GMC's wartime production. Lessons learned in North Africa, Europe, and the Pacific informed the development of post-war vehicles, including the famous 2.5-ton Deuce and a half, which would serve in Korea and Vietnam. Engineers acknowledged that innovations such as modular drivetrains and interchangeable components, pioneered under wartime pressure, became standard practice for decades. GMC's industrial achievement also reshaped perceptions of American manufacturing. The arsenal of democracy had proven itself not only capable of producing aircraft, tanks, and munitions at scale, but also vehicles that could endure extreme conditions across the globe. Government reports praised the collaboration between military planners and industrial engineers, noting that the speed and scale of GMC's production set a benchmark for future mobilizations. The success validated a national strategy. When necessity demanded, American industry could meet the rigorous standards of modern warfare. Human testimony further confirms the truck's significance. Soldiers who relied on GMC vehicles in the field often singled them out in memoirs and letters home. One sergeant in Europe described a convoy of GMC trucks as lifelines rolling across mud and snow, carrying fuel, food, and hope to the front. Officers noted that the predictability and reliability of these trucks reduced operational risk, allowing more aggressive maneuvers and faster advances. The combination of durable engineering and tactical planning transformed what had been a logistical vulnerability into a strategic advantage. The trucks also influenced morale on the home front. Factories in Detroit, Pontiac, and other industrial hubs became symbols of national resilience. Workers understood the direct connection between their labor and the survival of soldiers overseas. For many, building these trucks was a moral mission, proof that American hands and minds could meet the demands of a global conflict. Industrial output became as essential to victory as battlefield courage, and GMC trucks embodied that union of human effort and mechanical capability. Economically, GMC's wartime production accelerated innovations in assembly line efficiency and quality control. Modular construction, standardized parts, and rapid testing methods developed during the war would carry over into civilian automotive production, influencing the post-war boom in trucks and commercial vehicles. The war had forced experimentation under pressure, but the lessons endured, creating vehicles that were both reliable and easier to maintain, a direct benefit to post-war industry and infrastructure. By the war's end, GMC heavy-duty trucks had proven that logistical strength could be as decisive as firepower. Their durability and reliability allowed the U.S. Army to execute campaigns that might have been impossible with inferior vehicles. Convoys crossed continents, supplied front lines, and ensured that mechanized units retained their mobility. Officers, soldiers, and engineers alike recognized that the success of these trucks was not merely a matter of steel and rubber. It was the embodiment of planning, innovation, and human determination under the immense pressures of global conflict. As the war receded into history, the story of GMC trucks became a symbol of industrial foresight, engineering brilliance, and the practical application of human ingenuity. The machines that had carried America through the deadliest years of global conflict left a lasting imprint on military strategy, industrial production, and the collective imagination of a nation, proving it could mobilize, adapt, and endure. Looking back, the story of GMC heavy-duty trucks is more than a tale of steel and engines. It is a testament to human ingenuity under pressure. In 1941, America faced a profound logistical gap. Soldiers lacked reliable vehicles, supply lines were fragile, and the specter of global war loomed. What emerged from Detroit's factories, forged by engineers, workers, and military planners, was not just a fleet of trucks, but a lifeline for a nation on the brink. These vehicles exemplified the synergy of human effort and mechanical design. Every rivet, every reinforced axle, every modular engine reflected countless decisions, trial and error, and the relentless pursuit of reliability. Soldiers on the front lines relied on these trucks as much as their rifles, trusting them to deliver food, ammunition, and fuel through deserts, jungles, snow, and mud. Convoys of GMC trucks became symbols of endurance and mobility, transforming the Army's ability to fight and win in multiple theaters simultaneously. The broader significance reaches beyond the battlefield. GMC's innovations set the standard for modern military logistics and influenced post-war vehicle design for decades. Standardization, modular components, and adaptability, lessons learned under the crucible of war, became foundational principles for both military and civilian vehicles. American industry had demonstrated that it could meet extraordinary demands, a lesson in preparation, foresight, and resilience that echoes to this day. Yet there is also a human lesson woven into every mile traveled. The trucks tell the story of engineers who innovated under pressure, workers who labored tirelessly, and soldiers who trusted machines to carry them and their comrades through the most extreme conditions. In their engines, frames, and tires, one can trace the heartbeat of a nation rising to meet an unprecedented challenge. In the end, GMC's heavy-duty trucks were more than mechanical vehicles. They were instruments of survival, symbols of industrial ingenuity, and bridges between preparation and victory. Their legacy reminds us that in war, as in life, Human determination combined with thoughtful design can overcome seemingly insurmountable obstacles, carrying a nation forward, mile by mile, toward its destiny.